Dialing phone ringing. Dispatcher, 911. What is your emergency? Barely audible whisper, trembling voice. Lena, help please, help me. Dispatcher, ma'am, I can barely hear you. Are you in immediate danger? Sound of footsteps in the background. Lena's breathing becomes more rapid. Lena, yes. He is going to hurt them. My babies. Dispatcher, okay. I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your location? Whisper becomes even quieter, almost inaudible. Lena, 2347 Oak Ridge Drive. Please hurry. He does not know I called. Distant sound of a door slamming. Lena's sharp intake of breath. Dispatcher, units are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Are you able to get to a safe location? Long pause. Only the sound of Lena's terrified breathing. Lena, there is nowhere safe, not anymore. That whispered plea you just heard? Those were the final words Lena Morales would ever speak to the outside world. In less than 15 minutes, her voice would be silenced forever, along with 2 innocent lives that depended on her protection. But here is what haunts me about this case. Have you ever felt trapped in your own home? That sinking moment when familiar footsteps in the hallway fill you with dread instead of comfort? When the sound of your partner's voice makes your heart race with terror rather than joy? When you realize the person sleeping next to you has become a complete stranger and not the good kind of stranger? Maybe you have never experienced that level of fear, but I guarantee you know someone who has. That friend who stopped talking about her relationship, the neighbor who suddenly became distant, the coworker who started wearing long sleeves in summer, the family member who stopped bringing her partner to gatherings. Here is a statistic that will make your blood run cold. Every 36 seconds in America, someone becomes a victim of domestic violence. Every 36 seconds. That means while you have been listening to this introduction, at least 3 people have been attacked by someone who claimed to love them. Tonight, we are going deep into a case that exposes how love can transform into obsession, how protection can become imprisonment, and how a whispered call for help became a desperate race against time. This is not just another true crime story. This is a wake-up call that could save lives. Lena Morales thought she was living the American dream, a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, 2 precious children, Max and Luna, who were the light of her life, a husband who, from the outside, seemed devoted and successful, but behind closed doors, that dream had become a living nightmare of control, manipulation, and escalating threats. The 911 call you heard was not Lena's first cry for help. It was not even her second or third. It was her last. By the time those whispered words reached the dispatcher, Victor Morales had already made a decision that would destroy everything Lena held dear. But here is what haunts investigators most about this case. There were warning signs everywhere. Friends who noticed changes, family members who felt uneasy, neighbors who heard raised voices. Even Lena herself had been documenting incidents for months, desperately hoping someone would help her connect the dots. The question that keeps me up at night is this. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Were there signs that everyone missed? And more importantly, could you recognize these warning signs before it is too late? Because the truth is, domestic violence does not discriminate. It happens in million-dollar mansions and tiny apartments. It happens to doctors and teachers and stay-at-home parents. It happens to people who seem to have it all figured out and people who are struggling to get by. It happens to the strong and the vulnerable, the outspoken and the quiet. What makes this case so devastating is not just the loss of innocent life. It is how ordinary everything seemed until the moment it was not. How many red flags were dismissed as normal relationship stress? How many opportunities for intervention were missed because no one wanted to get involved? Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you care about protecting the people in your life, if you want to learn how to recognize when someone is in danger, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These stories are not just entertainment, they are education. They could save your life or the life of someone you love. Now let me take you back to where this all began. To a quiet street where everything looked perfect from the outside, but where terror was growing behind carefully closed curtains. Oak Ridge Drive was the kind of street that real estate agents loved to showcase. Mature oak trees lined both sides of the perfectly maintained asphalt. Every lawn was manicured to suburban perfection. Children rode bicycles on sidewalks while parents waved from front porches. The Morales family fit right into this idyllic setting, at least from the outside. Victor and Lena had moved to this neighborhood 3 years earlier, when their first child, Max, was just a baby. Victor worked in commercial real estate, a career that provided them with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. Lena had been a graphic designer before Max was born, but Victor convinced her that staying home would be better for their growing family. At the time, it seemed like a romantic gesture, a husband who wanted to provide for his wife and children. Their neighbors knew them as the friendly couple from the corner house with the blue shutters. Victor would chat with other fathers during weekend yard work, offering recommendations for lawn care products and discussing local school districts. He had an easy smile and firm handshake that made people instantly comfortable. When Luna was born 2 years later, the neighborhood women brought casseroles and congratulated Victor on his beautiful family. But behind Victor's charming exterior lay a calculated pattern of control that Lena was only beginning to understand. In the early days of their relationship, Victor had been everything Lena thought she wanted in a partner. He was attentive, romantic, and generous with his affection. He would surprise her with flowers, plan elaborate date nights, and tell her constantly how lucky he was to have found her. This phase, which experts now call love bombing, made Lena feel like the most special woman in the world. Lena came from a close-knit family in Arizona. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, raised by parents who encouraged her artistic talents and independent spirit. Her sisters often joked that Lena was the dreamer of the family, always sketching new designs and talking about opening her own graphic design studio someday. When she met Victor at a coffee shop near her college campus, she thought she had found someone who would support those dreams. The shift happened gradually. After they moved in together, Victor began making small comments about Lena's career ambitions. He would suggest that her freelance work was too stressful, that she deserved to focus on more important things. When clients called, he would sometimes answer the phone and tell them Lena was unavailable, forgetting to pass along the messages. Each incident seemed innocent enough on its own. Sarah Martinez lived next door to the Morales family for 2 years. She noticed things that troubled her, but she dismissed them as normal relationship dynamics. Victor was always very polite to me, Sarah would later tell investigators, but I noticed that Lena never seemed to finish her sentences when he was around. She would start to tell me about something, then look at him and just stop talking. The isolation from her family began with seemingly reasonable concerns. Victor worried that Lena's sister Isabella was a bad influence because she was recently divorced. He convinced Lena that Isabella's negativity about marriage might affect their own relationship. Phone calls to Arizona became less frequent. When Lena's parents wanted to visit, Victor always had work conflicts or home renovation projects that made the timing inconvenient. Max was a curious, energetic toddler with his mother's dark eyes and infectious laugh. He loved building block towers and knocking them down, much to Lena's delight. Luna was quieter, a contemplative baby who seemed to study the world around her with serious concentration. Lena's love for her children was fierce and protective. She would spend hours reading to them, singing lullabies and creating little art projects that covered their refrigerator. Victor's own childhood provided context for his need to control every aspect of their family life, though it certainly did not excuse his behavior. Raised by a father who was emotionally absent and a mother who struggled with anxiety, Victor learned early that love was conditional and fragile. He developed an overwhelming fear of abandonment that manifested as possessiveness in his adult relationships. The first time Victor raised his voice at Lena, Max was 18 months old. Lena had forgotten to pick up Victor's dry cleaning, a simple oversight that became a 20-minute lecture about responsibility and respect. She was so shocked by his reaction that she apologized repeatedly, promising it would never happen again. Victor quickly returned to his normal, loving demeanor, bringing her favorite takeout dinner and acting as if nothing had happened. Financial control came next. Victor suggested that combining their accounts would be more efficient for managing household expenses. Slowly, Lena lost access to their joint credit cards. Victor explained that he was better with money, that she did not need to worry about such mundane details. When Lena wanted to buy art supplies or gifts for her children, she had to ask Victor for permission and explain exactly how the money would be spent. At neighborhood gatherings, Victor was the perfect husband. He would bring Lena a drink without being asked, compliment her cooking, and speak proudly about his beautiful family. But at home, the criticism was constant. Her cooking was too salty or not ready on time. Her housekeeping was not thorough enough. Her parenting choices were questioned and overruled. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore, yet Lena found herself making excuses for Victor's behavior. Work stress, financial pressures, the normal challenges of raising 2 young children. Surely these explained his mood swings and increasing demands. If you have witnessed these red flags in someone you know, drop a red flag emoji in the comments below. Your awareness might help someone else recognize their own situation before it escalates. Sometimes the most dangerous relationships look the most perfect from the outside. What Lena did not yet understand was that Victor's control was methodical and intentional. Every isolated phone call, every dismissed concern, every financial restriction was part of a larger plan to make her completely dependent on him. And that dependence was about to become a trap she could not escape. By the time Luna turned 1, Victor's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble, and he was determined to blame everyone except himself. His commercial real estate business had been struggling for months. 3 major deals fell through in a single quarter, costing him thousands of dollars in projected commissions. Instead of examining his increasingly aggressive sales tactics or his tendency to overpromise clients, Victor found a more convenient target for his frustration: Lena. "If you had not been so distracted with your art projects, I could have focused on closing those deals," he told her one evening after putting the children to bed. "Every time I needed to make important calls, you were asking me to help with Max or complaining about Luna's teething." Lena stared at him in confusion. She had barely touched her art supplies in months, and she had handled both children's needs almost entirely on her own. But Victor's tone was so certain, so convincing, that she found herself wondering if she had somehow interfered with his work without realizing it. The phone monitoring started subtly. Victor would ask casual questions about her conversations with other people. Who had called? What did they want? Why was she talking to her mother so often? When Lena's phone buzzed with a text message, Victor would glance at the screen, claiming he was just curious about who was reaching out. Soon, he began timing her errands. A trip to the grocery store should take exactly 45 minutes, he decided. If she returned later than expected, Victor would question every delay. Did she stop to chat with someone? Why did she choose that particular checkout line? Had she forgotten something and needed to go back for it? "I worry about you when you are out with the children," he would say, his voice filled with false concern. "There are dangerous drivers everywhere, and you get distracted so easily. I just want to make sure you are safe." Victor's criticism of Lena's parenting became relentless. When Max threw a tantrum in the store, Victor would later explain that Lena had failed to establish proper boundaries. When Luna cried during a diaper change, it was because Lena was too rough or too slow. When the children were happy and playful, Victor took credit for providing them with a stable home environment. Lena began to doubt her own instincts as a mother. She would second-guess every decision, from what clothes to put on the children, to what snacks to offer them. The confidence she had once felt in caring for Max and Luna eroded under Victor's constant corrections and suggestions. Late at night, when Victor thought Lena was asleep, she would hear him pacing in his home office, speaking in hushed, urgent tones on the phone. These conversations always ended abruptly when he noticed any movement from their bedroom. When Lena asked about the calls, Victor would dismiss them as boring work discussions that would not interest her. The isolation campaign intensified. When Lena's sister Isabella called to announce her engagement to a new partner, Victor convinced Lena that Isabella was being reckless and impulsive. "She barely knows this man," he said. "Do you really want that kind of chaos influencing our children?" The phone calls to Arizona stopped entirely. Victor would answer when Lena's family called, telling them that Lena was busy with the children or resting. He promised to have her call back, but somehow those return calls never happened. Lena's friend Maria from her old design job tried to maintain their friendship, but Victor made it increasingly difficult. When Maria invited Lena to lunch, Victor would schedule a family obligation for the same time. When Maria dropped by for unexpected visits, Victor would explain that Lena was not feeling well or that the children needed their nap schedule maintained. The documentation began as a way for Lena to make sense of her own experiences. In a small notebook hidden behind her art supplies in the hall closet, she started recording Victor's outbursts and controlling behaviors. The entries were brief and factual, but they painted a disturbing pattern of escalation. March 15th. Victor, angry about dinner being 10 minutes late, yelled for 20 minutes about disrespect and responsibility. Children heard everything. March 22nd. Discovered Victor had been reading my text messages, claims he was looking for important information about Max's doctor appointment. April 3rd. Victor threw away my sketch pad, said I was spending too much time on frivolous activities, instead of focusing on family. The notebook became both a lifeline and a source of terror. Writing down these incidents helped Lena understand that she was not imagining Victor's behavior, but she lived in constant fear of him discovering her secret documentation. One afternoon, While Lena was changing Luna's diaper, she heard Victor rummaging through the hall closet. Her heart raced as she realized he was dangerously close to finding her hidden notebook. She quickly finished with Luna and hurried to the closet, pretending to look for extra towels. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Looking for that extension cord," Victor replied, his eyes scanning the shelves. "Have you been moving things around in here?" "Just organizing a little," Lena said, her hands trembling as she reached for a towel. "Let me help you find it." That night, she moved the notebook to a new hiding place inside an old photo album, but the close call left her shaken. She was running out of safe spaces in her own home. Victor's paranoia grew more intense. He became convinced that Lena was secretly communicating with other men, though she had barely spoken to anyone outside their immediate family in months. He would accuse her of flirting with the grocery store clerk or sending signals to their male neighbors. "I saw how you looked at him," Victor would say after they returned from any public outing. "Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I cannot see what you are doing?" These accusations were so far from reality that Lena initially laughed them off. But Victor's persistence wore her down. She began to avoid eye contact with service workers and neighbors, afraid of triggering another jealous outburst. The moment Lena realized she was afraid of her own husband came on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. Victor had been unusually quiet during lunch, answering her questions with short, clipped responses. When Max accidentally knocked over his cup of juice, Victor's reaction was swift and terrifying. He grabbed Max's arm with enough force to leave fingerprints, his face contorting with rage. "You are old enough to be more careful," he hissed. "Stop acting like a baby." Max began to cry, and Lena instinctively stepped forward to comfort her son. Victor turned his fury on her, his eyes cold and calculating. "This is your fault," he said quietly. "You let him get away with everything, and now he has no discipline." In that moment, Lena saw something in Victor's expression that made her blood run cold. It was not just anger or frustration. It was something much more dangerous. For the first time in their relationship, she was genuinely afraid of what he might do. Experts in domestic violence recognize this escalation pattern as coercive control, a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation designed to dominate another person. Unlike normal relationship conflicts which involve two people trying to resolve differences, coercive control is one-sided domination, where one partner deliberately undermines the other's autonomy and self-worth. The difference between healthy relationship dynamics and coercive control lies in the intent and pattern. Normal couples argue about specific issues and work toward resolution. Coercive controllers create ongoing campaigns of criticism, isolation, and intimidation designed to establish complete dominance over their partner's thoughts, feelings, and actions. But what Lena did not know was that Victor had already made a decision that would seal their fate. In his mind, the solution to his failing business, his growing paranoia, and his fear of losing control was becoming crystal clear. And that solution involved making sure that Lena and the children could never leave him. October 15th started like any other Tuesday morning. Lena prepared breakfast while Max played with his toy trucks on the kitchen floor. Luna sat in her high chair, babbling contentedly as she picked at pieces of banana. Victor read the news on his phone, occasionally commenting on local real estate market trends. The scene looked peaceful, ordinary even. But at exactly 9:37 in the morning, everything changed. Victor's phone rang with a call that would shatter whatever remained of his psychological stability. Lena noticed his face go pale as he glanced at the caller identification. He answered with a tense hello and quickly retreated to his home office, closing the door firmly behind him. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. Lena could hear Victor's voice rising and falling through the closed door, though she could not make out specific words. When he finally emerged, his entire demeanor had shifted. The man who had been calmly reading news articles was gone, replaced by someone whose eyes held a frightening intensity. "What was that about?" Lena asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Nothing that concerns you," Victor replied, but his voice carried an edge she had never heard before. It was not anger or frustration, it was something much more unsettling, a cold, calculated finality. Later testimony would reveal that the phone call had been from Victor's business partner, informing him that their real estate firm was facing bankruptcy. 3 major clients had pulled out of deals, citing Victor's increasingly erratic behavior and unrealistic demands. The partner had decided to dissolve their partnership, leaving Victor financially devastated and professionally humiliated. In Victor's mind, This call represented the complete collapse of his carefully constructed world. His business was failing, his reputation was destroyed, and his sense of control was crumbling. Rather than accept responsibility for his role in these failures, Victor's paranoid thoughts focused on a different target, Lena. He became convinced that Lena had somehow sabotaged his career. Perhaps she had spoken to his clients during social events, undermining his credibility. Maybe her lack of support at home had affected his performance at work. In his deteriorating mental state, Victor began to see Lena not as his wife, but as the source of all his problems. The change in Victor's behavior toward the children was immediate and disturbing. When Max asked his father to help build a block tower, Victor snapped, "You are too old to need help with everything. Figure it out yourself." When Luna reached for Victor during her afternoon feeding, he pulled away with visible disgust. Lena watched these interactions with growing alarm. Victor had always been a demanding father, but he had never shown outright hostility toward Max and Luna. Now, he seemed to view them as burdens rather than blessings. That afternoon, while Victor was on another tense phone call, Lena tried to reach her sister Isabella. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried her mother next, but after 2 rings, Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression dark and threatening. "Who are you calling?" he demanded. "Just my mother," Lena said, ending the call quickly. "I wanted to check on my father's doctor appointment." Victor stared at her for a long moment, then walked away without responding. Lena realized with growing horror that even her attempts to contact family were being monitored and controlled. The last normal moment of their family life came during dinner preparation. Lena was mashing sweet potatoes for Luna while Max played quietly with his food. Victor sat at the table, but he was not really present. His eyes were distant, as if he was working through some complex calculation in his mind. "Daddy, look at my airplane," Max said, holding up a piece of bread he had torn into an interesting shape. For just a moment, Victor's expression softened. He looked at his son with something approaching affection, and Lena felt a flutter of hope that whatever was troubling her husband might pass. But then Victor's face hardened again, and he turned away from Max without responding. The brief glimpse of the man Lena had once loved vanished, replaced by the cold stranger who had been growing more dangerous with each passing hour. During the bedtime routine, Lena's maternal instincts screamed warnings she could not ignore. As she tucked Max into his toddler bed and settled Luna in her crib, she felt an overwhelming urge to gather her children and run. Something fundamental had shifted in Victor's psychological state, and every fiber of her being recognized the danger. But where could she go? Victor controlled their finances, monitored her communications, and had systematically isolated her from every potential support system. She had no car keys, no access to money, and no allies who knew the truth about their situation. As she watched her children sleep, Lena realized with devastating clarity that escape was no longer possible. Victor had spent months preparing for this moment, ensuring that she would be completely trapped when his psychological breakdown finally occurred. The house fell silent except for the sound of Victor's footsteps pacing in the hallway. Back and forth, like a predator planning its next move. In a few hours, that calculated planning would turn into deadly action. 7:15 in the evening, Lena filled the bathtub with warm water, testing the temperature twice before lifting Luna from her bouncy seat. The baby giggled as the water touched her tiny toes, a sound that usually filled Lena with joy. Tonight, that precious laughter felt like a knife through her chest. Max splashed happily beside his sister, creating elaborate stories about his rubber duck's adventures. "Mama, look, Ducky is swimming to the castle." His imagination was boundless, his innocence complete. Lena smiled and responded to his chatter, but her attention kept drifting to the hallway where Victor's heavy footsteps continued their relentless pacing. 7:45. Bath time ended with the usual protests from Max, who never wanted to leave the water. Lena wrapped both children in soft towels, Luna's tiny body warm and sleepy against her chest. The nursery door stood open, revealing the peaceful sanctuary she had created for her babies. The room was painted in gentle yellows and greens, colors that would work for any child. Lena had hand-painted a border of dancing animals around the walls during her pregnancy with Max. A wooden rocking chair sat beside the window, where she had spent countless hours nursing both children while watching the neighborhood come alive each morning. Max's toddler bed occupied one corner, covered with a quilt that Lena's mother had made. Luna's crib stood nearby, close enough that Lena could reach between them during nighttime feedings. Books filled a small shelf, picture books with bright colors and simple words that Max loved to hear over and over. 8 o'clock. Story time began with Max's current favorite, a tale about a brave little bear who helped his forest friends. Lena read with exaggerated voices and animated expressions, determined to give her children this moment of normalcy despite the growing dread in her chest. Luna nursed quietly, her dark eyes growing heavy with sleep. Victor appeared in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the hallway light. "How much longer?" he asked, his voice carrying an impatience that made Lena's hands tremble. "Just finishing their story," she replied, keeping her tone steady for the children's sake. "They need to sleep, now." The command was clear, final. 8:30, both children were settled in their beds. Max with his favorite stuffed dinosaur, Luna with the soft blanket Lena had crocheted during her pregnancy. Lena kissed each small forehead, breathing in their innocent scent, memorizing the feel of their soft skin against her lips. As she dimmed the nursery light, Victor's hand landed on her shoulder with startling force. "We need to talk," he said, his fingers digging into her flesh. In the living room, Victor began to pace again, his movements becoming more agitated with each circuit around the coffee table. "That call today," he started, his voice low and dangerous. "My business is finished. Everything I worked for, everything I built, it is all gone." Lena tried to offer comfort. "We will figure something out. You are talented, you can start over." "Start over," Victor laughed, but the sound held no humor. "You think it is that simple? You think I can just forget that my own wife sabotaged my career?" "What?" Lena stared at him in shock. "Victor, I never." "You did. Every time you questioned my decisions in front of clients. Every time you made me look weak. Every time you chose the children over supporting my work." His accusations came faster now, each one more irrational than the last. 9:15. Victor's pacing stopped abruptly. He turned to face Lena, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood freeze. It was not anger anymore. It was cold, calculated determination. "I cannot lose what is mine," he said quietly. "If I cannot have my family, my success, my respect, then no one else will have them either." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lena's mind struggled to process what Victor was actually saying, what he was actually threatening. "Victor, you are scaring me. The children are asleep. We should—" "The children." He repeated the words as if they tasted bitter. "My children. My blood, my legacy. Do you think I would let you take them from me? Do you think I would let you poison them against me the way you poisoned everyone else?" 9:30. Lena realized with horrifying clarity that Victor had crossed a line from which there was no return. The man she had married, the father of her children, was planning something unspeakable. His words were not empty threats born of anger and frustration. They were promises, delivered with the calm certainty of someone who had already made his decision. She thought of Max, sleeping peacefully with his dinosaur clutched to his chest. She thought of Luna, barely 18 months old, who still reached for her father's face with trusting hands. They were innocent, perfect, defenseless. 9:45. Victor disappeared into his home office, and Lena heard the sound of drawers opening and closing. Her maternal instinct screamed at her to act, to do something, anything to protect her babies. But what could she do? Where could she go? Victor had spent months ensuring that she had no escape routes, no resources, no allies. The house creaked around them, every sound amplified by the terrible tension. Lena's heart pounded so loudly she was certain Victor could hear it. She crept closer to the nursery, listening for any sound that might indicate her children were still safe. 10 o'clock. Victor emerged from his office, his movements now purposeful and controlled. He looked at Lena with those cold, calculating eyes, and she knew that whatever window of opportunity might have existed was closing rapidly. "Go to bed," he told her. "It has been a long day." But Lena could not move. Every fiber of her being rebelled against leaving her children unprotected, even for a moment. She stood frozen in the hallway, torn between obedience and maternal instinct. 10:15. Victor's patience reached its limit. "I said go to bed, Lane." Instead, she moved toward the nursery door. "I want to check on them one more time." "No." Victor's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "Leave them alone." In that moment, Lena understood that she was out of time. Whatever Victor was planning would happen tonight, and her children would be completely helpless to defend themselves. She thought of Max's trusting smile, Luna's innocent laughter, and made the most courageous decision of her life. She had to call for help, even if it meant risking everything. With trembling hands, she reached for the telephone. 10:21 at night. Lena's fingers trembled as she lifted the cordless phone from its base in the kitchen. Every second felt like an eternity as she dialed 911, her heart hammering against her ribs. From the hallway she could hear Victor moving around, his footsteps growing closer to the nursery. The phone rang once, twice. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, trained to handle crisis situations. Jessica Chen had been working emergency dispatch for 6 years, and she immediately recognized the whispered tone that often indicated domestic violence calls. "Help, please, help me," Lena breathed into the phone, barely audible. Jessica's training kicked in instantly. Domestic violence calls required specific protocols designed to keep victims safe while gathering crucial information. She knew that raising her voice or asking direct questions about an abuser's presence could escalate a dangerous situation. "Ma'am, I can barely hear you. Are you in immediate danger?" Jessica kept her voice low and steady. "Yes, he is going to hurt them, my babies." The mention of children changed everything. Jessica immediately began typing notes while simultaneously alerting her supervisor to prepare units for emergency dispatch. Child endangerment cases received the highest priority response. "Tag, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your location?" Lena's voice became even quieter, almost inaudible. 2347 Oak Ridge Drive. Please hurry. He does not know I called. In the background, Jessica could hear the distinct sound of footsteps and what sounded like doors opening and closing. Her training told her that the situation was escalating rapidly. "Units are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Are you able to get to a safe location?" The pause stretched on for what felt like minutes. Jessica could hear Lena's ragged breathing, the sound of a woman trying to control terror for the sake of her children. There is nowhere safe, not anymore. At the dispatch center, Jessica had already sent 3 patrol units to the Oak Ridge Drive address with a Code 3 response, lights and sirens, maximum urgency. The first unit was 8 minutes away, the second 12 minutes, the third 15 minutes. In domestic violence situations involving children, those minutes could mean the difference between life and death. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me how many people are in the house," Jessie continued, following protocol while keeping her voice calm and reassuring. But Lena's response was cut short by a sound that chilled Jessica to the bone, the crash of a door being thrown open with violent force. "What are you doing?" Victor's voice exploded through the phone line, no longer controlled or calculated. The discovery of Lena's call had triggered the final explosion of rage that she had been dreading. I was just..." Lena's voice dissolved into sobs. Jessica heard the sound of the phone being grabbed, fumbled, and then the line went dead. At exactly 10:27, the emergency call ended. 6 minutes of contact. 6 minutes of a desperate woman pleading for help that was still minutes away. What followed in that house was a tragedy that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Victor's systematic destruction of everything he claimed to love was methodical and horrifying. In his twisted logic, if he could not control his family, then no one would have them. Lena's attempts to shield her children were desperate but futile. She threw herself between Victor and the nursery door, pleading, bargaining, offering anything if he would just spare Max and Luna. But Victor was beyond reason, beyond love, beyond any human emotion except the need to maintain absolute control. The silence that followed was deafening. The house that had once been filled with children's laughter and bedtime stories became a tomb of shattered dreams and destroyed innocence. At 10:34, the first police unit arrived to find Victor sitting calmly on the front porch, his hands folded in his lap as if he was waiting for a dinner invitation. His demeanor was eerily peaceful, almost relieved. "Mr. Morales?" Officer Rodriguez approached with caution, his hand resting on his service weapon. "Yes," Victor replied simply. "I think you are looking for me." Inside the house, officers found a scene that would require trauma counseling for everyone who witnessed it. Lena was alive but in shock, her maternal instincts having kept her fighting until the very end. Max and Luna were gone, their short lives ended by the man who should have protected them above all else. The dispatcher who took Lena's call that night, Jessica Chen, later became an advocate for enhanced domestic violence training in emergency response centers. Her quick thinking and professional handling of those crucial 6 minutes demonstrated how proper training can save lives, even in the most desperate circumstances. If this story has shown you the importance of dispatcher training and domestic violence education, please share this video. Your action could help fund programs that save families from tragedies like this one. The investigation into the Morales family tragedy was swift and thorough. Detective Maria Santos, who had handled domestic violence cases for over a decade, led the evidence-gathering process with meticulous attention to detail. What they discovered painted a disturbing picture of premeditation and psychological manipulation. Victor's home office revealed a cache of evidence that prosecutors would later use to demonstrate his calculated approach to controlling Lena. Hidden cameras had been installed throughout the house, allowing him to monitor her movements even when he was not present. Financial records showed systematic isolation tactics, cancelled credit cards, closed bank accounts, and intercepted mail from her family. Most damning was a handwritten journal found in Victor's desk drawer. Unlike Lena's hidden documentation of abuse, Victor's entries revealed his twisted justification for what he called necessary actions to preserve family unity. The final entry, dated the morning of the murders, contained a chilling statement: "If they cannot be mine alone, they cannot be at all." Victor's arrest was notable for his complete lack of emotional response. When Detective Santos read him his rights, he nodded calmly and asked if he could finish his coffee first. His behavior was so unnaturally composed that officers initially wondered if he was in shock or experiencing some form of psychological break. In 20 years of law enforcement, I have never encountered someone so detached from the gravity of their actions, Detective Santos would later testify. Mr. Morales discussed the murders as if he was describing a business transaction. The legal proceedings began 6 months later, drawing intense media attention and community interest. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Martinez, built their case around the evidence of premeditation and domestic violence escalation. They presented testimony from neighbors, friends, and family members who described Victor's systematic isolation of Lena and his increasingly controlling behavior. Victor's defense team attempted to argue temporary insanity caused by financial stress and mental health issues. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about his childhood trauma and suggested that his actions were the result of a psychotic break rather than calculated malice. However, the prosecution's psychiatric expert, Dr. Sarah Williams, provided compelling testimony about the difference between impulsive violence and planned domestic terrorism. Mr. Morales demonstrated clear premeditation, she explained to the jury. The surveillance equipment, the financial controls, the isolation tactics, these were not the actions of someone experiencing a temporary break from reality. They were the methodical steps of someone implementing a long-term strategy of domination. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Victor showed no emotion throughout the proceedings, even when audio from Lena's 911 call was played for the jury. Several jurors were visibly shaken by the recording, but Victor remained stone-faced, occasionally taking notes as if he was attending a business meeting. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Oak Ridge Drive, once a quiet suburban street, became a gathering place for vigils and memorial services. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other before the tragedy now organized support networks and safety awareness groups. Sarah Martinez, the neighbor who had noticed early warning signs, became a vocal advocate for domestic violence education. "We all saw pieces of the puzzle," she told a crowd gathered in the neighborhood park. "But we did not know how to put them together, or we were too afraid to get involved. That cannot happen again." Memorial services for Max and Luna drew hundreds of community members. The local elementary school planted a garden in their memory, with sunflowers and daisies that would bloom each spring. Children from the neighborhood created artwork depicting angels watching over other families, images that were both heartbreaking and hopeful. Lena's journey through grief was complicated by overwhelming survivor guilt. In the months following the tragedy, she struggled with the question that haunts many domestic violence survivors. Could she have done something different to save her children? Therapy helped her understand that Victor's actions were his responsibility alone, but the emotional healing process was slow and painful. Support groups for domestic violence survivors provided a safe space where she could share her experiences without judgment. 2 years after the tragedy, Lena made her first public appearance at a domestic violence awareness conference. Her testimony about the warning signs and escalation patterns in her marriage became a powerful educational tool. She spoke about the importance of trusting instincts and the danger of dismissing controlling behavior as normal relationship stress. "I want people to understand that domestic violence does not always look like what you see in movies," Lena told the audience. "It can start with small acts of control that seem like love and protection. It can happen to anyone, in any neighborhood, in any family." Her advocacy work led to significant policy changes in their county. Police departments implemented enhanced domestic violence training, focusing on recognizing coercive control patterns. Schools began teaching healthy relationship education, helping young people identify warning signs of abuse. Perhaps most importantly, other families began coming forward with their own stories. The tragedy that shattered the Morales family became a catalyst for community-wide conversations about domestic violence prevention and support for survivors. The ripple effects continue today, creating networks of awareness and protection that honor the memory of two innocent children while working to prevent future tragedies. Looking back at Lena's story, the warning signs were everywhere, but recognizing them requires education, and acting on them requires courage. Let me break down every red flag that appeared in the Morales family tragedy, so you will know what to watch for in your own community. The isolation phase came first. Victor systematically removed Lena's support system by creating conflicts with her family and friends. He timed her errands, questioned her conversations, and made social gatherings uncomfortable through subtle criticism and control. This is not normal relationship behavior. This is calculated manipulation. Financial control followed quickly. Victor convinced Lena to combine their accounts, then gradually restricted her access to money. He monitored her spending and required explanations for every purchase. When someone cannot buy basic necessities without permission, they are being financially abused. The monitoring and surveillance escalated over time. Victor read her text messages, timed her activities, and installed hidden cameras throughout their home. Technology abuse has become increasingly common in domestic violence situations, and it represents a serious invasion of privacy and autonomy. Criticism and emotional manipulation wore down Lena's self-confidence. Victor constantly questioned her parenting decisions, dismissed her opinions, and made her doubt her own instincts. This psychological warfare is designed to make victims completely dependent on their abuser's approval and guidance. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a leading expert in domestic violence prevention, explains when friends and family should have intervened. The moment someone starts making excuses for their partner's controlling behavior, that is a red flag for loved ones. When social interactions become strained because of one person's demands or presence, intervention conversations should begin. Safe intervention strategies do not involve confronting the abuser directly, which can escalate danger for the victim. Instead, trusted friends should maintain consistent contact, offer specific help rather than general support, and provide information about resources without pressuring immediate action. The National Domestic Violence Hotline operates 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233. Trained counselors provide safety planning, emotional support, and connections to local resources. Text support is available by texting START to 88788. Lena's advocacy work has reached over 50,000 people through speaking engagements, educational programs, and policy initiatives. Her testimony helped pass legislation requiring domestic violence training for emergency dispatchers in 12 states. The Lena Morales Foundation has funded safe house expansions and prevention education programs across the country. Success stories from intervention efforts show that early action saves lives. Maria Rodriguez noticed her co-worker making excuses for bruises and offered specific support rather than general concern. She researched local resources, maintained regular contact, and eventually helped her colleague develop a safety plan that led to successful escape from an abusive relationship. The Oak Ridge Community Safety Network, formed after the Morales tragedy, has identified and supported 37 families experiencing domestic violence. Their education programs in local schools have trained over 2,000 students to recognize healthy versus unhealthy relationship dynamics. You can get involved in prevention efforts by supporting local domestic violence organizations, participating in awareness campaigns, and most importantly, staying alert to warning signs in your own community. Small actions make huge differences. A concerned conversation, a shared resource, or simply maintaining contact with someone who seems isolated can save lives. If this video has opened your eyes to warning signs you will now watch for, hit that like button to help spread this crucial education. Subscribe to our channel for more cases that protect and inform rather than just entertain. Share this video, it could literally save someone's life. Drop a blue heart in the comments if you are committed to watching for these signs in your community and taking action when necessary. Lena wants to leave you with this message. Trust your instincts about people you care about. If something feels wrong in their relationship, it probably is. Do not wait for permission to offer help. Do not assume someone else will intervene. Your courage to act could be the difference between life and death for someone you love. The tragedy that took Max and Luna's lives cannot be undone, but it can be prevented from happening again. if we all commit to recognizing the signs, supporting the vulnerable, and refusing to let domestic violence hide behind closed doors. Every 36 seconds, someone needs the help that Lena was waiting for. Make sure they get it.